IGPP Expert Talks. I am Heena Goswami, Editorial Consultant with IGPP, Institute for Governance, Policies and Politics, New Delhi. We are here on the sidelines of an international conference being organized by IGPP in collaboration with CSSS, Jawaharlal Nehru University, Justice Liburg University, Gießen, and German Research Foundation, Germany. The conference, Environmental Policy Discourses since the 1960s, Politics, Problems and Narratives of Environmental Policies in Europe and Asia, is an attempt to bridge narrative and inquire into the discourses of environmental policies that have governed Europe and Asia since the 1960s. Academicians, researchers, and experts are gathered in New Delhi, and today we have with us one of the key participants of the conference, Dr. Patrick Ziegenhain. Welcome, Dr. Patrick.
Thank you.
Dr. Patrick Ziegenhain is an academic, writer, and consultant. He is currently the Associate Professor at Department of International Relations, President University, Indonesia. Fluent in 4 languages, his academic interests lie in politics, economics, and international relations of Southeast Asia from a comparative perspective. Let us begin with the conference. To talk about the intersection of environment and international politics, do you think that individual nations' worldview about environment has some impact on international relations in terms of how they deal with other nations or what their priorities are on the agenda?
Yeah, I would say that the individual behavior of countries has indeed a deep impact on how environmental issues are dealt with at a global level. So, take, for example, the election of Donald Trump as US president and his stop of support for many global environmental initiatives like the Paris Agreement against climate change. So, I mean, here we can see how, of course, an influential nation like the United States have negatively impacted the global governance on environmental issues. So it's important that to collaborate on the international level, that individual countries also support the, let's say, agreements on environmental matters. I mean, this also refers to India, but also other bigger players. Of course, smaller countries have less influence, but of course they could also join in regional organizations like the ASEAN in Southeast Asia. Yeah, I would say this, so yes.
And you have also spent considerable time in Southeast Asia, and Southeast Asia and European societies are very different in terms of as we talked about their living standards. And so do you think that their priorities as society and economy define their approaches towards environmental policies?
Yeah, of course, developed countries have a different approach in general because they already have in general a very high standard of living, a high energy consumption, a high, so for them it's a bit, yeah, you drive less cars, turn off the air condition, don't produce so big cars, and so that it's a change towards reduction of consumption. Yeah, whereas in developing countries like India, Indonesia, and so on, the large proportion of the society is still on the way to look for this Western lifestyle, to have the quality of life with this high consumption. Of course, this will not work out. I mean, if every citizen on this planet would have, the energy consumption of an American, I think the planet would collapse. So I think these are different approaches. The Europeans and Western, the Americans had to reduce there, whereas the other one have the big ambition to develop, to become more. So that's, in the end, we have to see these two perspectives.
Sure. You've lived in Southeast Asia. So to talk about Southeast Asian politics, how important is the role of religion in Southeast Asia's domestic politics?
Yeah, I'm now since 8 years in Indonesia. I have a permanent residence in Indonesia. And I maybe tell you from this Pew Research Institute survey from 2019 what the religiosity of people. There were, let's say, representative surveys, and the highest one was 98% in Pakistan, Afghanistan, but then came Indonesia with 97%. Yeah, so meaning Indonesia, as the biggest nation in Southeast Asia, is very religious. It not only refers to the Muslims, but also to the Christians and the Hindus that there are. So it's propagated by the state philosophy Pancasila, which is the five words. One of them is ketuhanan, meaning the belief in God. Yeah, so religiosity, if you want, is already been inscribed in the constitution, and therefore. Not only therefore, but we have also a revival of religion in the last 20, 30 years, particularly Islam. So that brings all to a high level of religiosity in Indonesia, but also in other countries. Okay, let me give some other countries. Southeast Asia is religiously very diverse. We have Islam as majority religion in Malaysia, Brunei, and Indonesia. All of them quite religious. Then we have Buddhism in Thailand and Myanmar, which are also quite important. You know, Buddhism has legitimacy for the Thai monarchy, and also in the conflict, maybe you heard in Rohingya issue in Myanmar. So Buddhism here is also quite important social force. It's less important. I forgot Christianity in the Philippines, of course. Yeah, Catholicism particularly. It's more a social force, but also influential, I would say, in domestic level politics. But not so, religion is not so important in the communist state like Laos and Vietnam, where. Did I forget something? Yeah, Cambodia. Cambodia is also rather Buddhist influence. Okay, that's all what I can say about religion in Southeast Asia.
You said you feel like there's a revival of fundamentalism.
No, religion, I say in general. Of course, let's say religiosity. I can tell a bit about Indonesia, the country I'm living in. There are more and more people who are, for example, were born as Muslims, but not so really 100%, do not pray 5 times, and do not go to the mosque and so on. But now there's a sort of hijrah, that's the word hijrah movement, meaning like making these people believers. So they're the Muslims not converting other people, but they're making the former Muslims more religious, meaning that they really follow what the Quran, the Holy Book, predicts them. So it's feasible. You can also see it in the way people dress, it becomes more religious. The way people, for example, the prayers, every ceremony begins with a prayer and so on. So religiosity in general is rising. Okay, maybe next question, if you ask me about fundamentalism, I can ask you. Okay, fundamentalism is also on the rise, but I think we should be realistic. There were terror attacks in Indonesia. Maybe you heard the Bali bombing in 2002 and so on. This has really, to some extent, declined. Also, it's not so much directed against followers of other religions. So I think fundamentalism, that means terrorism is not on the rise, I would say.
Okay. In the aftermath of George Bush's Iraq invasion, Indonesian population's opinion of the Western government hit a low. Do you see similar patterns with ascendancy of Trump and the rise of right-wing groups in the USA?
In short, there was even before these, let's say, US wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, there was already an anti-American resentment in Southeast Asia, but as we've heard also in here today, this morning in the conference, there's also a lot of people in Indonesia also look very positive to America, and a lot of them would emigrate, because it's an attractive country. But of course, those people who are also now more religious and more, let's say, feel connected with their brothers and sisters in Iraq and Afghanistan in the Islamic ummah, they would rather be anti-American, so in turn and so on. Of course, there's a certain kind of percentage of the population who's definitely anti-American, and this population increases to some extent in the middles of society if there's an American attack on Islam, or if there are anti-Islamic statements as have been done by Donald Trump. So we can say, but on the other hand, one factor, America is also in the South China Sea. America is the only one who can protect the Southeast Asian countries from the Chinese. So that's why a lot of countries in Southeast Asia collaborate, the Philippines, Thailand, particularly Singapore, who are good friends with the American for these strategic and security issues.
To talk about the notion of ummah, do you think it holds true in modern day Islamic nation?
Yeah, of course. We have several identities, multiple identities. We have a local identity. We have a regional identity, meaning here in India, you're from Rajasthan, and so maybe you feel this regional identity. You have a national identity, but then you have also a religious identity. The question is, how important is this for you? Yeah, maybe your religion is Hindu. You feel belonging to the maybe Hindu community, and also this with the Muslims who belong to in their identity feel closer to a Muslim, maybe with a different nationality than to a country person with a different religion. So that means, there's an identity, and the okay, let's say there's the era of nationalism. Yeah, it's somewhat under threat because of globalization and with the use of social media and all this. You can get information from all the world, and that's why there's a different counter perspective that many people feel in their identity, that the religious identity is more important. I think this is particularly true in the Islamic community. I'm not familiar so much with the Hindu community, but I think Christianity not so much. I would say in Europe and America do the full, but here in Southeast Asia and South Asia, I think it's clear that this feeling of togetherness with a religious community is rather on the rise there.
Do you see patterns in how identity has influenced international relations? Like in the past, maybe, or what future implications do you think that, identity politics can have?
That's identity politics are not very, good for peace and stability, because you make a we and them. Usually you have a very positive feeling about your we group and a negative about the others. It's confrontation. So I realize that there is an increase of identity politics, but I try to, at least in my, I think it's not good if if countries pursue identity politics. In Indonesia, President Jokowi, he's Muslim, of course, but he always tries to mention the other religion, visit other people, other religion. I think it's important to include and say we are one group, irrespective of religion or gender or orientations or whatever, but more, let's say, bring people together, and this creates peace, stability, and in the end, prosperity for everybody.
Sure. To talk of prosperity and economics, do you think Asian nations, Southeast Asian and the group that is Asian, does it have the potential to come together as EU nations have done? And
Southeast Asia, ASEAN.
Southeast Asia.
Yeah, okay, maybe let me talk a bit about ASEAN. Yeah, ASEAN was founded in 1967. It was not founded as an economic institution. The European Union was European community, European economic community. It started with economic purpose after the Second World War. So there are different targets. Why the countries joined ASEAN? Yeah, it's very diverse. Countries in Southeast Asia, they want to have stability, sovereignty, and recognition from the other Southeast Asian states. So they insisted on their full national sovereignty. The principle of non-interference. I mean, that's all enshrined in the ASEAN Charter and in the principles of ASEAN. So that's very different what European Union wants. In European Unions, the countries of the EU have to give up national sovereignty, for example, of their currency or their agriculture or whatever. This is managed together. And I don't see that the Southeast Asian countries want to give up their full sovereignty. It's also not supported by the peoples of this country. So that's why I think Southeast Asia, at least in the next 20, 30 years, will not become like the EU. And also the governments, I never heard that they took seriously approaches to change this. I think ASEAN will remain the same, an intergovernmental organization, which also has its achievements, but it will not become like the European Union.
The G20 Summit was held in Bali this time.
Yeah.
So, what hopes can the Southeast Asian nations have from G20 or?
Yeah, let's say Indonesia was a host of this and they managed very well, got the recognition of the world community, they get a lot of attention from potential investors and also a lot of articles. For example, The Economist wrote last week, please don't, Indonesia matters, a big article in The Economist. So it was good for Indonesia as a host and for maybe also India as the follow host next year, 2023, will also get some attention from the world. So that it really matters what's going on here and in which direction India will go in international affairs. We cannot expect too much from these concrete results. It's I think the biggest topic was, of course, the Ukraine war, and Russia was very, very isolated, we can say, in the final declaration of G20 Summit. The war was, I don't know, not condemned. That's maybe not diplomatic, but it was approved by also big countries, as I'm right sure, China and India also, they accepted these formulations. So that was sort of unity 19 against 1, and that was Russia, which his aggressive war damaged international peace and the development of the world economic. So I think it's was a good show that the world can cooperate on certain issues, that the world leaders of these G20 countries, which represent 75% of the world economy, that they could agree on certain terms. But of course, the differences still are there. I mean, America here, Europeans here, then we have big countries like India and China. So the world is still, how to say it, we don't have a world government or something, and also the United Nations cannot do this. But at least the states can cooperate and meet, and I think that's encouraging sign for the near future.
Sure. To talk of near future, you're also an educator and you have been with the President University for several years now, I believe. As an educator, how do you think that youth can mold the discourse of religion and politics?
Yeah. Youth and religion and politics. Yeah, but let's say we have to talk about different world regions. I grew up in Europe. In Europe, religion is not very important. Only 10 or 15% of the people in Germany believe in religion or follow religion or go to church or whatever. In other world regions, as I explained before, in Indonesia, people are very religious, and sometimes these religious people are even more religious than their grandparents and parents. So they want to really have this religious identity, which I say can be, how do you say, it's ambivalent. Religion can give you force to do good things, but you have to be tolerant and respect towards other religions. But on the other, that's a positive aspect. Meaning, religion can give you strength, self-confidence, and you feel part of a group and so on. But on the other hand, religion have also this we and them, these identity politics. This can create conflict. Yeah, what I can say, I hope. Everybody should have the choice, he or she, what way to deal with religions, but it's important to have information about other religions. So what do they do? What do they believe? For example, many religions are quite similar. Actually, Islam, Christianity, and Jewish, they are quite, same source, if you want, same God, and only different prophets. So people should be aware of this. And also show respect towards other religion, even if I'm this religion, then I still say you are this religion. So it's respect, and then the religion can contribute positively to world peace, stability, and prosperity. Let's say. So I don't see religion per se negatively, but it could, under certain circumstances, also be not good for the before mentioned targets.
Thank you so much for being with us today.